Well, welcome into the 5 to 6 Daily Fantasy Golf Show. This is usually the point in the show when I would say, that is Riku Mukherjee. I am Tony Altieri, and welcome in. But Rick is on a golf course playing some golf, which is always a good reason. If you're not going to be on the show, you might as well be out there swinging some clubs and hitting the white ball around the course. Obviously, this week, we're a little off schedule. Typically, the Monday night slot didn't work for us this week, so we're calling this an emergency 9. So here I am giving an abbreviated version to you. It'll be a little bit different. We're going to update ownership. We're going to look at the most recent weather. I'm going to go through quickly my model and maybe give you a little more information to help you hone in on those guys in the price buckets where we think there's an opportunity to be different from the field. Those guys will help you take down a GPP. We'll talk a little bit about the odds and about betting this week. And then we'll get into a little bit of one and done strategy before we call it a day. And when I say we, it's me and you here, and we're going to talk through it. I encourage all of you to go ahead and leave a comment, send a message, ask a question. I'm happy to answer any of those live on the broadcast or after the fact. Leave a note down in the comments. Also in the comments, you will see a link for the Discord channel. I say it each and every week. I will continue to say it because it is the most entertaining, best part about doing this show and interacting with the community of people that follow us is the ability to have that Discord channel. It's like a big, long text string with about 100 of your best buddies, and everybody cracks jokes, posts memes, asks questions, looks at odds, posts metrics. Join the Discord, click the link down in the comments, and make sure you are a member of the Nickel City Mafia community. We talk sports every week, whether it's Buffalo Bills, NFL, and of course, golf. So let's get into it. No recap from Mexico. Congratulations, Tony Finau. I wasn't betting it 8-1, but it was the Rahm and Finau show like we all expected. Congratulations, Tony Finau. He's now won 4 times, I think, in 9 months, which is a hell of a stretch. But if you look at the events that Tony Finau's won, I mean, they're kind of these jabroni events where there's maybe 1 or 2 other top guys in. He's yet to contend in any of these big elevated events like we have this week at the Wells Fargo. So let's go ahead and jump right into the Wells Fargo. Quail Hollow, it's a big boy course. It's 7,400 yards. As we know, this course, the Genesis, which is played at Riviera, the Farmers at Torrey Pines, and you could even throw Valero in there in terms of course length. They all play over 7,400, and we tend to see the same types of guys that find their way to the tops of the leaderboards. There's no big surprise why Max Homa and Rory McIlroy continue to dominate at this course each and every year, and those names are 2 of the common names that find themselves at the top of the leaderboards at the Farmers and at the Genesis. It's because of the long irons. It's because of the dominance off the tee. And Quail Hollow, to be quite honest, is probably the most correlated to off the tee prowess than any course on tour. If you look at the metrics, whether it's distance components, accuracy off the tee, overall strokes gained versus the field off the tee, this place demands a very good driver of the golf ball. So ball striking is at a premium this week. It is absolutely a must at this course. The rough will be long, and the long, wet winter that Charlotte, North Carolina has experienced is also going to mean that things are going to be thick and heavy. We could have weather this week, which I'll get into here in a second, that could impact rounds 3 and 4. But again, this is a big boy course. Got to be long off the tee, got to be accurate. Ball striking is a must. The around the green game, as you'll find in a number of different podcasts and sources, not as important as at this course, but finding fairways, distance, and hitting greens in regulation is absolutely a premium. So those are the guys we're going to want to circle around in DraftKings and, of course, on our betting cards this week. So let's go ahead and jump right into the metrics here. So let's go back to the top of the board. As you can see, McIlroy, he's won here, I think, 3 times. He's 11-1 here. Even though he's not coming in the best form, he, by and large, has the best course history. In my model this week, which I'll bring up here in a second, you'll see that I've weighted course history probably heavier than any of the other events, with the only exception being Augusta. I think there's a correlation that courses like this have, whether it's suiting the eye or a skill set, that we seem to see the same kinds of guys rise over and over again. So course history is going to be weighted very heavily. And then my statistical model this week, and I'll share with you right now some of the different metrics that I used in building out my model. Let's pull this up right here. So actually, let's jump into ownership first. On the ownership side of the scale, you can see here at the top of the board, really Rory and Cantlay are the two guys that are garnering the most. Not too far behind are Finau and Xander. And of course, I will say this, when you look at these metrics and you see how ownership is breaking down, you have to remember that not everybody's going to be 15% owned, right? Like there's no possible way that every single guy above, $8,700 is going to be in the 13 to 20% range. It just statistically cannot happen. But what I will tell you is it does tell us that there are some flat spots in ownership where regardless of what guys are targeting, you may have an opportunity to go after a guy where I think at the beginning of the week we were a little bit scared. Patrick Cantlay is one of those guys I think that a lot of people have circled on. The form is phenomenal. When you look at what he does well in the courses that he has had success at, it translates very well to this course and Quail Hollow. He's coming in at about 15% ownership, which is not scary. I think a lot of us were projecting him at potentially 20, 22% ownership. Same thing with Rory coming in at 17% ownership. So a little bit surprising to see a bit of the dip. And then the other side of that coin is guys like Tony Finau and Xander Schauffele. I think headed into the week, we thought both guys would be under-owned because Cantlay and McIlroy would be over-owned. And what we're seeing is the ownership is coming in pretty flat. So what that tells us is in terms of construction, we're going to see a lot of people in the 11, 10, and 9K range being used to build lineups, which naturally pushes people into the mid to low sevens. So that means this 8 and 9K range, when you look at the ownership percentages in relation to what I just showed you, and again, this is all via Fantasy National. Thank you, Fantasy National. Go join, be a member. I have no sponsorship or I guess benefit of you doing that, but it's a great tool. I use it each and every week to build out my models, presents a lot of great information and data in a very simple form. But here's what I would say. If people are going to end up pushing into the 7Ks, you can see the area that's going to be ignored is this Sam Burns to Corey Connors realm from 7,900 to 86. So if you're looking for a place where you can get different, where you can make your lineups different in order to take advantage of some ownership building in one direction or another, that's a great opportunity to do it, is to go and grab guys in that 79 to 8,600 range. So back to the model, back to the board here. Let's jump right back into the breakdown. Top of the board, McIlroy, 11-1, like we started off. Jason Day, all the way down at 9,000. For me, my bets this week, oddly enough, are going to be Morikawa, Spieth, Homa, and Hovland, all coming from this range. I think we're seeing very good odds across the board on those guys. And we're also seeing the ownership kind of bear out where people are starting to gain steam as we get closer to lock here tomorrow morning. In terms of pricing and Draftkings exposure, what I would say is I still like a build that starts with Xander, Spieth, and I think you could even go Jason Day in that mix. I think that is going to give you some differentiation up at the top. It'll also allow you to pivot in certain spots when we go farther down the board and those natural pooling areas, right? Because if you're starting with three guys above $9,000, that's naturally going to push you into the low 7Ks and in the high 6Ks. And when we go back to that range, I'll dip back into ownership again. And you can see there are some clear guys where everybody is starting to put their money on the guys in that price range. So if you're going to do that, make sure you avoid the chalk in those lower ranges, or find some place to make yourself different up top, which I always think is a much better strategy in terms of making sure you get guys through the cut. If you're going to play the chalk down low, be different up top. Take the guy who's a premium golfer at a higher price at much lower ownership. Make yourself different. That's how you win GPPs. But here are the guys for me at the top of the board. I'm going with Xander and Spieth. I think both guys will probably be under-owned across the board, regardless of what Fantasy National says. And then Day and Hovland are the two other guys I'm going to rotate into those mixes. As we drop down into the 8Ks, everybody's all over Cam Young. I do believe Fowler, despite the fact that he's gaining a lot of steam this week, he seems a popular topic. I think the ownership on him is going to be suppressed because of the price point. At $8,800, we've been used to seeing him, sub $8,000 and at times crest into the 8Ks. But to have him at $8,800 bookended by Justin Thomas and Cam Young, I think he's going to get squeezed out right there. Other pivot plays in this range that I think are at least worth talking about. Shane Lowry's gaining a lot of steam. I completely understand it. Sahith Theegala, same thing. The guys that I think where you can get different and have shown that they play well at this course, one is Brian Harman. Of all of the guys in this range, he has by far the best course history at Quail Hollow. When I look at Brian Harman's finishes overall here, and I'll pull up my model internally and I'll give you his last couple starts here. Harman rates out fourth out of 150 guys in the field. And Harman's course history here, the guy's got a couple top 20s. He's played really, really well. He's made a number of cuts here. I don't think he's missed a cut in his last 4 or 5 rounds here at Quail Hollow. So that gives me a really, really good indication that I think he's primed for success. The other thing that I like about Harman is coming in at about 4 or 5% projected ownership. So there's a guy where you can get really, really different. And like I mentioned, that entire 8K range is going to go under owned, except for Justin Thomas and Cam Young. Sam Burns even coming in at 9-10% ownership is pretty strong. So, in terms of other guys in this range to think about, the other one that I think is at least worth throwing out, even though he hasn't played in this tournament. And again, the course history isn't the end all be all. We also look at form, and his form isn't great either. But Tom Kim at $8,400, we saw what he did at the President's Cup. I mean, this is a guy who went bell to bell with Max Homa, lost on the last hole. I think he took down Justin Thomas in the President's Cup. And so he played on a much more difficult version of Quail Hollow. Yes, the routing, like the course routing from hole 1 to hole 18 was different, but the fact that he had so much success on the biggest stage against the biggest golfers in the world gives me some confidence that Tom Kim has good prowess and some experience here. And also, we're talking about a significant ownership rate in Tom Kim. So Harman and Kim, to me, are the two guys that I would be targeting. Fowler is another one in terms of ownership. But my favorite plays here, despite the fact that he's probably going to be the most heavily owned guy, is Cam Young. When you look at the long-term skill set, he's an absolute beast off the tee. He ranks inside the top 5 in driving distance. Off the tee overall, he's number 1 or number 2 in most people's models. He is as well as mine. I love Cam Young here. The fact that he played in the President's Cup, it has some exposure there too. Even though it's not a ton and it wasn't great, he's been to the course. He's experienced. He's been on that stage. I like that. Cam Young's my favorite. And then I also do like Tommy Fleetwood down at $8,000. For me, Fleetwood and Harman's going to come down to pure ownership. Right now, Harman's coming in 4 or 5 points back, basically half of where Fleetwood is. So I'm probably, as much as I hate to admit it, because you all know how much I hate Brian Harman, I could see myself playing Brian Harman at $8,000 because of 4 or 5% ownership in GPPs. Down in the 7Ks, we've still got some quality guys, and I think some people that folks have forgotten about, so I'll bring them up. Gary Woodland is a popular guy this week. I bet Gary Woodland last week in Mexico at 30-1. I'm betting him again here at 100-1. Gary Woodland is very, very live here. Statistically, in a model that I've built specifically for Quail Hollow that is heavily weighted towards off the tee prowess, he rates out number 1. I love everything about Gary Woodland. I'm a Gary Woodland guy. Rick would tell you I have a Gary Woodland problem. I absolutely do, but I love Woodland here. Corey Connors is another one that I think when we're talking about ball striking, the premium, he's not the longest guy off the tee, but when you're talking about a good combination of distance and accuracy and pure ball striking, there are very few that are better than Corey Connors. So I like Connors at $7,900. Dropping down a little bit farther, Grillo is very, very popular, and I think you're going to want to avoid him. When you start going down the board a little bit farther into Joel Damon, Buckley, Yager, like those are names where I think you can get just as much success or made cut equity in a golfer at, not even close to the ownership. Hadwin is another one that I really, really like at 7,400 right now. He's coming in at about 1 or 2% ownership, which is insane because when you think about the kind of golfer that Adam Hadwin is and the kind of golfer that Emiliano Grillo is, there isn't a lot of difference. Neither guy are super long off the tee. Both guys are pretty damn good ball strikers that just need the putter to get hot. Speaking of hot putters, Denny McCarthy at 2.5% ownership is also very, very attractive. Buckley has gained a little more steam as the week has built because of the fact that he is so long off the tee. And a lot of people are seeing him in the statistical models pop up time and time again. Joel Damon has good course history here. The other guy that I really liked at the beginning of the week that I've heard no one talk about it, and I kind of get it, right? Because he hasn't necessarily been super hot. There's been nothing really to write home about in terms of his finishes. But when I think of long-term form, when I think of skill set, when I think of guys that are premium golfers, Adam Scott at $7,300 is intriguing to me. The last time we saw him was at the RBC Heritage and then at the Masters before that. Nothing to write home about. Top 30 finishes. I think he finished actually 31st and 39th in those two events, but two premium fields, elevated events, and a major. The guy makes the cut, comes through, finishes inside the top 40. This is the place in the last two times that he has played it. I don't think we've had him on this course since 2018, but he's made the cut both times. His off the tee game, he ranks inside the top 25. He's also inside the top 20 in proximity from 200 plus. Oh, if I didn't mention that, long irons are going to be a premium this week as well too. Most of the approach shots, over 50% of approach shots on this course, come from beyond 175 yards, with well over 26% of those coming from beyond 200. So long iron play is absolutely crucial. In addition to all those skill sets, his off the tee prowess, his long iron skills, Adam Scott also ranks inside the top 30 in driver's distance. So I love Adam Scott at $7,300. And right now he's an absolute steal in my opinion at like 5 or 6% ownership. So Adam Scott's probably my favorite play all the way across the board at 7,300. I just think you're getting so much golfer in relation to the other guys that are around him. A couple other names that are popular and gaining steam. Obviously, Akshay, we saw what Akshay's done. He's played really, really well on long courses. What he did at Puerto Rico and then what he did last week at Mexico. We just see like his skill set is starting to transition to the next level. We're seeing him play really, really well on the PGA Tour. The other guy that's gained a ton of steam that I thought was going to be a bit of a surprise and a guy that I'd kind of stashed in my back pocket for this week was Samuel Stevens. The secret's out. He's by far the most heavily owned guy at $7,000, and for good reason. When you look at the places where Samuel Stevens has had a ton of success this week, I mentioned it off the jump. Riv, the Farmers, long courses, Samuel Stevens splits on courses over 7,400 yards. When I look at every golfer in this field and I say, show me the best guys, tee to green, on courses over 7,400 yards, Samuel Stevens ranks out number one in this field, which is why he's gaining so much ownership. For me, I think you have to take a hard stand on a guy like Samuel Stevens. And what I mean by that is going back to the ownership and the construction strategy on DraftKings. If you're just going to say, look, I'm all in on Sammy Stevens, I think this is a great week for him, I love him at $7,000, then you've got to get different somewhere else. Go get your Brian Harmons, go get your Sung J M's, go get your Xander Schauffele's at the top of the board and play those guys where you can pivot and feel like you have a little more confidence. Because when we look at the other guys in his price range at $7,000, Matt Wallace, Adam Shake, Ben Griffin, like those are all pretty good pivots that not a lot of people are playing. Even Akshay at 6% ownership, half of what Samuel Stevens is a pretty good pivot. So if you're going to make that stand on a guy like Samuel Stevens, who is a very popular pick, and you've just said, he's my guy, go get different somewhere else, I do think there are very viable options at $7,000, all the way from Andrew Putnam to Akshay. I just think every one of those guys is live this week, and I don't think you're losing a lot in comparison with Samuel Stevens in terms of made cut equity and success potential on this course in Quail Hollow. Down at the $6,000 range, you can see Luke List, who every single week rates out absolutely phenomenally. There's no surprise there. What I would say is there are some areas where you need to avoid ownership landmines down in the 6Ks. And if you do that, I think you can kind of pick your poison down here. Luke List and Bramlett, because of the length off the tee, along with Will Gordon, are going to be very, very popular plays. Surprisingly enough, short hitter Eric Cole is also coming in a little bit higher at 6 or 7%. Now, that's not a ton in the grand scheme of things, but when you think about the other options around Eric Cole, when you've got guys like Lee Hodges and Garrett Higo and Lucas Glover, who are all coming in at like 1% ownership, and you've got a guy like Eric Cole who's coming in at 6%, take a real hard look. If you're looking for a golfer at $6,800, maybe Eric Cole's not the guy, because we don't have a lot of long-term stats on him on the PGA Tour. He's a rookie this year, or at least I think statistically a rookie. And, for him to be, 7-8 times the ownership of guys around him, there's obviously some really good pivots. I'm not afraid to even go to a guy like Mackenzie Hughes at a place like this. We've seen Mac Hughes, despite that he's not very long off the tee and he's kind of, the homeless man's version of Jordan Spieth. He does a very good job playing these courses. We see his name on leaderboards at the Genesis and at Torrey Pines year in and year out, because he is so good around the greens. He's magic with the putter. And even though around the green isn't super important this week, if you're not hitting greens in regulation, you're not hitting fairways, you're going to have to get up and down. And my belief is that scoring is going to be at a premium this week. So the ability to chip it close and get up and down for par, you're going to need to be able to do that on the par fours this week. And so Mac Hughes, I think, despite the fact that he doesn't fit the course profile that we've laid out, he is very, very live this week. The other guy that people seem to be circling around is EVR at $6,700. I just don't get it. I mean, I get the long-term, the long off the tee piece, but EVR is so bad. I just don't understand how people can continue to go there. He's a complete pass for me, especially at the ownership that he's starting to steam at. Same thing for Cam Champ. I think there are better options. To me, Smotherman has been playing much better. Ben Taylor's also down in that price range. So to go to a guy like Cam Champ purely because he smashes the ball off the tee, that's not a good reason for me. Guys like Ches Reavie had played well at the course comps that I've laid out and at Quail Hollow. He's not a long hitter. And again, he's half the ownership of some of the other names that I've thrown out that people are kind of circling around. The other popular guy seems to be Pearson Coody. We've seen him, during the course of this experiment on being on the PGA Tour temporarily. We've seen him pop up on leaderboards. He is gaining some steam, as well as Alejandro Tosti from last week, who was no big surprise. Everybody was on him, and we saw him show up and have a very good round on Sunday. So he's got a lot of steam going into this. Outside of the guys that I named as kind of the ownership bombs, you're free to kind of pick whoever you want down here. Most people are coming in sub 3%, with names like, Sepp Straka and Aaron Rai being 1-2% overall. I don't like a ton down here in the 6Ks. To be honest with you, I don't like anything below $6,700. Lipsky's always a look for me because of the long-term form. Higo, because of the distance off of the tee and the combination of being at 1% ownership, that is intriguing to me. Alex Smalley and Robbie Shelton are also guys that I will look for to see where things get ferreted out. But I think overall, if you can build a construction that you go and grab one of those lower guys in the 8Ks and in the 9Ks, I think you're going to be better suited than trying to do the very popular construction of everybody in the 9Ks and then a few guys down in the 7Ks and 6Ks. Avoid that chalk as much as possible, because I do think you're going to have people playing a lot of the same guys this week down here, because this is a full field event and not like majors where we have all of the best players. We're missing a few names. And so we're not seeing the kind of pricing we would normally see. And we're just not seeing the quality of guy that we would see in some of these bigger field events down in the 6Ks. So that is my suggestion. I do want to give you a quick update on weather for the week, because as I had mentioned, weather could be a factor on Saturday and potentially even into Sunday. So let's go ahead and pull that up and talk through it. So what I've got here is the National Weather Service's forecast for the Charlotte, North Carolina area, which, if you're not familiar, that is where Quail Hollow is. So let's go ahead and jump down into that. As you can see, on Thursday and Friday, the white and gray boxes here that are represented, not a ton of wind, not a ton of precipitation either day. The purple line represents wind, gusts up to the 6-7 mile an hour range. No real wave advantage all the way through Friday afternoon in terms of wind or even weather. Where things start to get a little bit interesting as we creep into the Saturday forecast. And we'll jump over that. You can see we've got quite a bit of rain. These green bars projected on Saturday. So in terms of lineup construction and how you should be stacking guys, I don't think there's a significant advantage whether you go AM, PM, or PM, AM. I would say you can use the mixed approach because there's not one condition that's going to be better than the other significantly. Saturday, we could see some weather and some delays, which could push things on Sunday or end up with some funky 18-hole rounds like on Sunday. Really don't know, but weather obviously is going to be a bit of a challenge on Saturday. For me, one and done selections this week. Vic's very, very popular. If you've got him, I think it's a very smart play. Cam Young is another very smart and very popular pick this week. And then the third one is Rory. Those are the three guys that kind of everyone's circling around. But I'll give you a couple of names if you still have them available that I think you should take a very hard look at if you're looking at your one and done strategy for this week. The first one that I would throw out there, which is going to be a bit of a surprise, but if you've got him available, is Jordan Spieth. Spieth is coming in most leagues like 1-2% selection rate right now this week. And we haven't seen him at Quail Hollow in a very long time. But when you look at his form, the Heritage, he loses in a playoff to Fitz. The Masters, he finishes in 4th place. The Valspar, he finishes 3rd. I mean, Spieth's finishes here over the last month have been absolutely unconscious, and I think he's a very sneaky play in one and done this week. The other guy that I really like that not a lot of people are talking about because he obviously just won last week, it's Tony Finau. We saw this when he went on his run earlier in the year. I mentioned, he's won 4 times in the last 9 months, but 2 of those wins came back to back. And right now, Finau is playing absolutely fantastic. He doesn't have the best course history at Quail Hollow, but again, long off the tee, very good on approach, proximity from 200 plus. Finau inside the top 10 with long irons from that plus 200 range. Number 1 in approach, and he's inside the top 35 in terms of overall off the tee and driving. He also ranks inside the top 25 in driving distance in this field. So when you look at Tony Finau, a lot to really like. So I think Finau might be another really, really sharp pick. And then the other guy that I would throw out there, because again, other than Spieth, he may have the best form coming into this week. And he does have some pretty good records here at this course, as well as his time on the President's Cup. That's Xander Schauffele. I think Schauffele is the other guy. So I'd rank them in that order in terms of sneaky plays. Spieth 1, Finau 2, Schauffele 3. All 3 guys, premium. I think all 3 are going to get it at a significant discount versus other one-and-done strategies. Or weeks, I should say. And so if you need to make up some ground, you need to be different. I like all 3 of those guys this week. Again, if you're not subscribed to the Nickel City Mafia channel, make sure you jump on, you subscribe, go to YouTube, click the button. We dump a bunch of great content in there. The guys just got done doing a massive build up to the draft, full coverage of day 1, day 2 draft coverage, as well as an analysis of all of the picks by the Buffalo Bills. But as we get closer to football season, we'll be producing more football content. You'll have a ton out there for fantasy from Chris and Brick, as well as the guys, Jake and Mike, doing their bi-weekly analysis of everything Buffalo Bills. And of course, Rick and I doing the golf show each and every week. We'll get back to our normal rhythm next week on Mondays. Rick will be right here with me. We'll give you our projections and go through a little more of a structured format. But again, this emergency 9 here at 2:00 on a Wednesday afternoon. Hopefully you got what you need to fill out and finalize your lineups, make those one and done selections, and then betting cards for the week. For me, I mentioned I'm kind of sticking in that 20 to 30 range. That's where I live. I mentioned my bets off the jump, but I will post my final card in the Discord. So make sure you click the link, you join the Discord, join the conversation, be part of the Nickel City Mafia community. And of course, good luck to you this week. And I hope all your fantasy and betting dreams come true. Good luck at the Wells Fargo, everybody. Have a great one.